heavy wet snow and unleashing strong winds.
Hey Dave, how you doing? Just doing a little bit of running this morning, so excuse
will
me.
be among the highest that we've seen for this entire winter season. It has been below average for snowfall across the Northeast this year, and so this nor'easter will be very impactful because we haven't really seen a whole lot of snow.
New York Governor Kathy Hochul already has warned that the storm could be deadly.
Storm-battered California is getting more fierce weather. A new atmospheric river came ashore Monday night in northern and central parts of California and is expected to move south over several days. Atmospheric rivers are plumes of moisture that turn into rain and snow. Those with money in two failed banks started lining up to get their money back yesterday as news spread of the failure of Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank. Dave Barry was among the worried customers yesterday at a Silicon Valley branch in Wellesley, Massachusetts.
We have an obligation with payroll. We have an electrical business, and we have to meet payroll this afternoon, so that's why I'm here.
He talked to WCVB-TV in Massachusetts. All the deposits in both banks are covered by the government, even those exceeding the federally insured limit of $250,000. President Biden's expected to sign an executive order today that's intended to increase the number of background checks to buy guns. This morning, China says the U.S., Britain, and Australia are going down a dangerous path. Australia just agreed to buy nuclear-powered attack submarines from the U.S.
They've been talking, Dave, for some time. Hey, praise the Lord, Dale. How you doing, sweetie?
This is about China's announcing it will reopen to tourists. The AP's Karen Shamas.
China has announced that it will reopen its borders to tourists following a 3-year halt during the pandemic. The move comes as China seeks to boost its tourism and economy. China is one of the last major countries to allow tourists back in. The decision to open up comes after the government announced a decisive victory over COVID-19 in February. All types of visas will resume, and a visa-free entry at some destinations has also resumed. The notice doesn't specify, however, whether vaccination certificates or negative COVID-19 tests would be required. I'm Karen Chamas.
In France, trade unions are calling for another round of nationwide protests tomorrow, Wednesday. They're angry about President Macron's plan to raise the retirement age to 64 from 62. It's an unpopular plan, but he insists it's necessary. I'm Rita Foley, AP News.
This is 8:20 a.m. WCPT Willow Springs and streaming worldwide at WCPT820.com. We are Chicago's progressive talk, where facts matter. Now your WCPT 820 weather update.
From the Weatherology Weather Center, I'm meteorologist Michael Carroll. High temperatures working up into the upper 30s for today. We'll see a good deal of sunshine. Then for tonight, mostly clear, a low of 21. For Wednesday, sunny to partly cloudy, headed up to a milder high of 50. And then rain returning to the forecast on Thursday with a high of 38.
Hello, Mike.
For Friday, a chance for rain-snow mixture on the breezy side in the upper 30s. And that's your latest Chicago weather update. Currently, it's 24.
Social Security is with you through life's journey. Get to know us at socialsecurity.gov. We are there, day one, with baby names and a gift that lasts a lifetime. We are there as you grow, protecting you and those you love. We are there when you get your first job, helping you to save for the future. We are there when you marry your sweetheart to help secure your new life together. We are there if the unexpected
Hi, dear. How are you?
to help you see life.
Hi, Santita. Good morning.
Good.
We are there.
Hey, honey,
when you start
you
your
want to go
next
over
chapter
the
to make
one
sure
sheet?
you get off to a
Have
great
they
start.
added 3 minutes?
And we are there when you lose your soulmate to help make sure you will be all right. We are with you through life's journey. Social Security, securing today and tomorrow. Get to know us and see what you can do online at socialsecurity.gov.
Produced at U.S. Tax.
Miss Wanda, how you doing? Please give Mr. Corey my love.
Hi, I'm Avina. I'm 7.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Hello.
Hi, can you hear me? I can hear you. I'm on tie line 1.
Hey, how you doing? This is Mike.
Can you hear me?
you doing this morning?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Great. If you don't mind, we're actually.
Hi, Jewel. I'm on tie line 1.
You are?
Yes.
Okay. Because we have tie line 1 up and we can't hear you.
Okay, well, I don't
what the issue is.
I don't know, because I could hear the station. I could hear everything.
Can you hear me talking to you?
Let me reset it, okay?
Okay, yep, reset it and I'm going to try and do something on this end.
Wait a minute. Can you hear me now?
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Now?
Yeah.
I got
Okay,
you.
very
Can you hear
good.
me?
Okay, very good. I can hear you.
Okay,
Let me turn
great.
this off. Can we go over the run sheet very quickly?
Yes, we have the run sheet and we have Reverend Thurston on as well.
Okay, I just want to make sure that we have, let's test, I'm up on Facebook. Let's test his sound, but let's do the run sheet, please.
Okay. We're good now. Okay, so we have Reverend Thurston on first. And he's already up. We have Dr. Knighton. We'll go into our first break. We have Chaparral's live read. And then, is it Artemis?
Just say Ms. Myrick.
Ms. Myrick, okay. We'll have Ms. Myrick, and then Reverend Thurston will stay on. And then we will also have Dwight McKee. We'll go into our second hour. We'll have a Team Hochberg read. And then we will have Dr. Wolf and John Nichols for our last segment. Does that sound good to you?
That sounds good. Dwight McKee might stay on with Dr. Wolf, but I don't know.
Okay. That shouldn't be an issue. I'll keep him on unless you tell me to drop him, okay?
Okay, fantastic.
Okay. Now, we have about a minute and a half. Do you want me to add one more minute?
Please.
To check the Facebook?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, because we can't go on without having tested Facebook. You know, you don't want to test these things on the air. Okay. Pastor Thurston, can you hear me? Which is my point. Okay. Hey, everybody. Today we're going to be talking about these. Am I echoing now?
No, you're good now.
Oh, no, I'm looking at the people on Facebook and YouTube.
Okay.
Someone on YouTube said that I'm echoing. Am I still echoing, Dave? The echoing stopped? Okay, very good. No echoes now. Very good. Thank you. Yep, and they are jet black to go with my jet black clothes today. Yep. Okay, can I hear Pastor Thurston, Jewel?
We have 2 minutes.
Okay, let's bring up Pastor Thurston.
He's on.
Okay, Pastor Thurston? Pastor Thurston?
Hello?
Okay,
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Fantastic. Now, board operator, can you hear Pastor Thurston?
Testing, board operator. Can you hear me? Hello?
You both sound great. I got both your audio on Facebook.
Fantastic. All right, let's cook with some hot grease and have a great show. You know, Pastor Thurston, we're going to talk about these bank failures in the second hour.
We have about a minute and 15 seconds.
Perfect. Thank you.
We're going good. Everything's good. We're going to come in strong to this.
Oh, we're good. Let the words of our mouths and the meditations of our heart be acceptable in thy sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Thank you for another day. 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 In your presence. Yes, thank you for another day. All right, everybody, let's get right to this. Okay. turn that off. That's interesting. They don't have it out yet.
All right, stand by. We have about 10 seconds.
We can change the world, change the world.
Here we go.
Okay, thanks.
We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. It's a joy to be with you on Tuesday, March 14th, 2023. Let's talk about these bank failures. What is going on? We've not seen anything like this since 2008. And although corporate media spokespersons and pundits on television and radio argue to the contrary, really we've had the second biggest bank failure in our history. Washington Mutual happened in 2008. But let's talk about this. How much exposure do you have? Indeed, the Silicon Valley Bank, Pastor Thurston is listening now, and he's very interested in economics. They had more than $170 billion, but only 151 billion of those dollars were not insured. So because it was a crypto-heavy bank, they were not insured by the FDIC, but the FDIC is covering them. And I just think it's odd that if you want to get more than a certain amount of money out of your commercial bank, you have to sign papers on it. So do I need to go to Silicon Valley to get some love and some justice on my money? And do I need to have a bank account, a robust bank account, to get some justice? Think about it. We can't get $20,000 of relief for students. Think about it. And the people who are holding up that process are the banks. And the people who are regulating the banks are the banks, because the Fed is a group of banks. It's not a government agency, everybody. So we're going to talk about that today. Yeah, the Federal Reserve is not a government agency. It is a group of banks. So the banks are overseeing the banks. How's that supposed to work? Call me at 773-763-9278, 773-763-WCPT. And of course, we have, as we do every Tuesday, we have John Nichols. We're going to have Dr. Max Wolf, who's making a special appearance this week, so we can talk about, today, so we can talk about what's happening, what he sees happening with these banks. And really, John Nichols will help us to understand the political fallout. And we're going to talk about, we're going to have a different take on the Chicago mayoral race with Pastor Stephen Thurston and Live Free Illinois. And Dwight McKee's going to be joining us as well. What about the consent decree? What about the police? What about a police that have such a low clearance rate? In other words, they are twice as likely to solve a murder in the white community than they are in the black community. Law and order, we're going to take care of, we're going to get all this law in order, and we're going to have order in the law, and we're going to have order in these streets, and we're going to have the law enforced in these streets. But no one gets arrested in the black community when somebody in the black community gets killed. Got to talk about that. What is up with that? So call me at 773-763-9278 as I come to you from WCPT, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station, and AM 950 radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. Meet my morning stars, Dave and Hannah and Shirley from beautiful Philadelphia, and Daryl and Andre, and so many of you. Wanda from North Carolina, Miss Wanda from North Carolina, Tara, how you doing? Sending you all so much love. Sheila, sending you all so much love today. Meet us over on YouTube, the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. Like and share. Sheila Hendricks. Hey. And the Santita Jackson and Friends Facebook page. That is my active page. Santita Jackson, I've got more than 1,000 people who are trying to be my friend on Santita Jackson. That's the landing page, everybody. My Facebook page is Santita Jackson and Friends. Please go over there. Santita Jackson and Friends, and become my friend. I would love to have that happen. So let's get right to it, everybody. In Chicago, we're going to have a sunny day. Minneapolis, St. Paul, 32 degrees. Wow. and mostly sunny. In the NBA, the Timberwolves 136, the Hawks 115. The Kings will be playing the Bulls tomorrow. And what else is going on? The NHL, the Bruins will be playing Chicago, and the Wild have the night off. Everybody is talking about these bank closures. Everybody's talking about these bank closures. Indeed, what's noteworthy is the president gave a speech on it, a la the fireside chats that FDR gave. Now, he initiated those fireside chats really 90 years ago this week, 90 years ago on Sunday. So it's 90 years ago and a day that essentially the President of the United States, President Biden, had to issue the same kind of calming address. Don't put your money in mattresses like my great-grandmama Tibby used to do, and your great-grandparents and great-great-grandparents and all. Anyone who lived through the Depression knew what it was like to try to go to the bank, and you couldn't get in there. There were bankers' holidays all over the country. The state started rolling them out. So in order to stop the hemorrhaging, the president said, okay, we're going to have a bank holiday, a national one, and we're going to get this right, and we're going to start the FDIC and insure your money and all of that. But that started with a fireside chat to allay the fears of the American public 90 years ago. But we've had the second biggest banking collapse in the United States history, a Silicon Valley bank. And then we had two more. By the end of the weekend, we'd had three major bank failures. So we got to talk about that today, everybody. At the same time, America has increased its dominance as the world's top arms exporter. Did you know that? And Barney Frank, who created the Dodd-Frank oversight with Christopher Dodd, who was in the U.S. Senate at the time. Of course, Barney Frank was in the U.S. House of Representatives. He's under fire for downplaying deregulation while being paid by Signature Bank, one of the banks that did fail. I still love Barney Frank. He's a good guy. Feel a good guy. Really, really good guy. And, of course, Elizabeth Warren has called for a clawing back of the bonuses for these Silicon Valley bank executives. Before the bank actually closed, the CEO he paid out the executives, gave them their bonuses before they left. You can't make this stuff up, everybody. You cannot make it up. Call me at 773-763-9278. Pastor Stephen Thurston, you can't make this stuff up. You can't make it up. And you cannot get $20,000 of relief for people who've gone to college. And now we're in a town in Chicago, Illinois. The undergraduate tuition at the University of Chicago is $100,000 a year. Who can afford to go there? Hyde Park has always been a upper middle class, really an upper middle class and wealthy neighborhood. Now it is really, you're seeing how, basic houses cost $1 million there. Because it's a $100,000 a year university. Who can afford that? The average American can't do that. I mean, it's infuriating. And then I see the wait a minute. The feds are the banks. And they oversee the banks? Oh, come on, man, look. I just had to break it down for you guys that way. That's what the Federal Reserve is. It's not a government institution. It's a gathering of the banks. Give me some good news, Pastor. And when can we hear you and see you on Facebook? I know, because we want to remind people, because you did change your date and time.
Yes. You can see me every Friday, 3 p.m. Central Standard Time on my Facebook page. That's Stephen with a PH, Stephen Thurston, 3 o'clock Friday, Central Standard Time. And if by chance you miss it, it's still up there. You can go back and catch the replay.
Absolutely, and we can go, and we want to hear your sermon from Sunday at New Covenant. How can we access that?
Sure, you can go to New Covenant Missionary Baptist Church. Just drop it in Google, New Covenant Missionary Baptist Church, Chicago, and the page will come up, and if you can go follow the link, there's a link there on the tab that shows, watch sermons, watch that, you get access to it, and hopefully something that I said this past Sunday will help to inspire and change your life.
Absolutely. I know it really helped me. Well, and of course the book is Mirror Moments. You're going to have to share it with Amazon. I know, I'm sorry, but you're going to need to do that so more and more people can get the book. I know you don't want to do it. You resist. But Pastor, what is the good news today? I mean, because people today, this morning, now they're only talking about the banks. They tried to kind of move around it, but people feel very insecure. There's just a lot going on, and we need some good news.
There's so much. Well, the good news is that we can take our brains off of overdrive. I've got a confession to make today. I'm a recovering multitasker. Now, I'm sure you know what multitasking is. Just in case we've got somebody that's new to the party called life, let me give a definition. It's the performance of more than one task at a time, and you're laughing because you're in the same boat.
That was not very nice.
The truth will set you free. For me, my multitasking can look like watching TV while scrolling on social media on my phone, while researching something on my laptop, while thinking about what my next sermon topic or mirror moment topic is going to be all at the same time. And yes, sometimes I'm switching back and forth between all of those things. And sometimes I'm doing some of that while I'm driving. Listen, I not only used to multitask my way through each and every day, but I also used to pride myself on it. I'm so productive, I think. Just look at all the things that I'm able to do and accomplish. Only I forget to do something or to CC someone on an email or to look up from writing an email while on my phone sitting at a red light long enough to recognize that the light has now turned green, only to have a bunch of cars swerving around me with their drivers now waving at me, but with just one finger. Asking your conscious mind to do multiple things at once is more difficult than we tend to consider. Listen, the human brain can't do that many things simultaneously. Essentially, what happens when you multitask is that your brain toggles rapidly between two or more tasks. The more you try to do things simultaneously, the more likely it is that something will be lost or some ball is going to be dropped as your brain is trying to switch focus. And if you've ever tried something like listening to the weather forecast for tomorrow while reading an email, it's not uncommon to realize you missed tomorrow's weather because you were reading and not listening. Or you have to go back and reread some or all of the email because you were listening and not reading. Listen, each time you switch your focus, whether it's due to an interruption or multitasking, it takes your brain time to reorient itself and get back on task. For some, it can take seconds. For others, it requires minutes. Some others, even longer. The more you switch tasks, however briefly, the more time you spend getting back on track. Not only does multitasking make us less productive, it can also lead to increased frustration, irritability, and stress. But you didn't know that. Listen, the more we multitask or switch between tasks, the more we distract ourselves and interrupt our thought processes. And after coming across some research on multitasking and how harmful it can be to our mental health, I began to try to single task as much as possible. My thought process, having read all sorts of articles on brain health and multitasking, was that maybe it would be better if I didn't ask quite so much from my brain. And it turns out I was right about single tasking, being kinder to myself and to my brain. If I only expected myself to do one thing at a time, it was easier to focus and to see the task through. And I found that single tasking allowed me to pay more attention to whatever I was doing. Single tasking also led to me being able to break my tasks down into smaller, more manageable pieces, each of which got their own allotted time. And in addition, I realized that when I focused on one task at a time, I gained a sense of satisfaction at being able to actually complete my project. I felt more accomplished, and if I had to take a break, it was so much easier to see where it is that I needed to put things back up. And so instead of having 5 open in-progress items on my to-do list, I had one at a time. And I enjoyed the tremendous satisfaction of being able to cross things off of my list and moving on. In addition to feeling more productive, my overall stress levels, they dropped drastically. And I was able to see some daily progress and celebrate it. And I gained a better handle on how much I was able to realistically accomplish in the day. And so these days, I try hard to move to single task whenever I possibly can. to simply do one thing at a time, Santita, or focus on one task at a time rather than trying to accomplish multiple things at once. Now, some days it's easier than other days, but I always find that when I can stay focused on one thing, my stress levels decrease and my ability to focus and finish things increases. As I said, I'm recovering. I'm a recovering multitasker. So I don't have it down pat yet, but daily I'm working at being better, and daily you can too. So how about starting today? Focus on one thing at a time. We got so much going on in our life and in our world. It can drain your brain literally. Slow down. Take it one thing at a time. And I promise you, you'll see your stress levels, your anxiety, all of that stuff decrease.
Amen. Whew. Thank you. Thank you. Because, you know, I have a very close friend, and every time we are somewhere, he is looking at his phone. But now we've reached the agreement that when we're together for dinner or for lunch, yeah. No, you put that down. You know, I didn't demand. Okay, I'm not. I understand that about men. I'm that girl. I said, you know, really, if we're going to do this, I'm put my phone down. We should do that. We can talk with each other, and then you can run back to your office and do your thing, get on the plane, whatever it is that you want to do. But let's do that. And, you know, and I've seen improvements. Okay? Yes. So, I mean, because we multitask in our personal lives, and we're not getting anything out of it. We're just missing each other. And then when we're about to get out of here, we're like, oh, I wish I'd spent more time with you, not more money or made more money. Right. Come on, you guys. Right. Everybody, Mirror Moments, get the book. And then every Friday at 3 p.m. Central Standard Time, follow Pastor Stephen Thurston on Facebook Live, everybody. Very quickly, you know, we're going to have you on, so just stay right there, Pastor. But I've got about 2 minutes left. And I want Dr. Knighton to speak to something on the other side of the break. Tilda Swinton, who's one of the top movie actresses on earth. I mean, she's also fantastic. She's done such brilliant work. She was at an event, and of course we're thinking about movies because we just had the Oscars. And she was at this event, and she said, you know, she was so relieved that things had gotten to a point where when she was at this big event that no one was wearing masks. And she said that she has a shoot for a movie in Ireland. And they said that she needs to wear a mask. She said, absolutely not. I'm not doing it. I want to ask Dr. Knighton about that on the other side of the break. Back in just a minute on the Santita Jackson Show. And then let's talk about, if we really want to talk about law and order, let's really, really, really talk about it. Why are the clearance rates just generally so low? But in the black community, they're abysmally low. If you are killed in the black community, chances are you have a 1 out of 5 chance in having your murderer apprehended. That's not a great return on our investment. What do you think? Call me at 773-763-9278. Back with more of the Santita Jackson Show in just a minute. Oh, Pastor Thurston, is it Artenise?
Yes.
Okay, very good. I thought so. I just wanted to make sure that I was, but of course I will formally acknowledge her. Dr. Knighton, how are you?
That's fine.
Thank you so much. But if you could just speak to that would help us a whole lot.
She'll stay.
Okay. Just for a couple of minutes. Just, you know, because, like at Pastor Thurston's church, they have the masks for you when you come in, so that you can put it on before you come into the sanctuary. But then we've had Pastor Vicki Johnson, and she said, no, you don't have to wear a mask. We strongly suggest it, but what you can do is you can sit over here if you're not going to wear a mask, and you'll sit over here if you do wear a mask. So it's just, people are following customs and not rules, I guess.
Yeah, but I think the thing is more than that, though. And I think the problem, like, and this is where you get sound bites from the media, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the big Cochrane review was done, and the Cochrane review, you know, the outcome of what people have been like raving about is saying that masks don't work. But I find it very interesting that nobody is talking about what correct infection prevention and control practices look like before and after wearing a mask. That's what I'm concerned about, because it's the same way. Remember, Santita, I was talking about how, but if your gloves pick up a bioburden of germs because you touching everything, the gloves that you think can help them become a weapon, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's the same thing that I'm explaining with masks. If you're not washing your hands, if you're wearing the mask as a chin girdle and then you're pulling it back up, of course it's not going to work, you know? And I think that's the part that people don't want to talk about or acknowledge, is the fact that they're not cleaning their hands before and after, they're not disposing of them properly, and they're not following the rules that's on the side of the box. If it only say wear it for 4 hours, wear it for 4 hours. If it's saying don't wear it outside because if it's exposed to sunlight, it's going to break down the barrier of the mask, don't wear it outside. So I just find it interesting because we have this black or white mentality, and we dismiss the fact that we do things wrong. And that's why we're getting the wrong results. And it's leading to false conclusions that they don't work. But they do work in certain settings. And you know, I've never been a person to say wear a mask outside.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And after I heard you, I stopped wearing a mask outside. But I see so many people who insist upon wearing masks, but their noses aren't covered. I'm like, what are you doing?
Yes. Ain't that cool? And then get this, they breathing in and out, right? They breathing in and out, and so all of the droplets from their nose is going right on the front of their mask. And then the next time they go to touch the outside of their mask, when they taking it off, they now have transmitted that over to somebody else. That's why I always get a kick out of the people saying masks don't work, don't even wear them right.
Oh, man, I have to remind people, I'm like, you know, you should cover your nose. Oh, okay. Are you serious right now?
What? Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, I find it so interesting, you know. I call them the pseudoscientists, because a little bit of noise control come out and...
Miss Jackson, we have about 30 seconds.
Who do we have? Hold on one moment. Hold on. I'm sorry.
Sorry. We have about 30 seconds, about 20 seconds now.
Do we have Shapiro?
We have Shapiro, and we have Miss Myrick.
Okay.
We have Miss Myrick, and I am still working on Dwight McKee. He has not answered yet, but I'll let you know when I have him.
Perfect. Thank you so much. All right, stand by.
Stand by.
Hey, Shapiro.
We can change the world, change the world, change the world. Oh, yes, we can. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Santita Jackson Show. It's Tuesday, March 14th, 2023. We're going to be talking about these bank failures at the top of the hour. We're going to have John Nichols and Dr. Max Wolf. It's going to be a great sharing of information with you. But we also have some information to share with you about the police, since law and order and crime, and not peace, but just crime, is at the center of the election cycle here in Chicago. Nobody's talking about peace. It's just nuts. Yes, I editorialized, but I can do that. And I think we need to talk about that, too. Is there a plan for peace? Or do you all just want to trade in guns and violence all day long? Is that the plan? I'm not with that. Call me at 773-763-9278, 773-763-9278. You have a 1 in 5 chance of having your murder solved, or a loved one's murder, if you are in the black community in Chicago. What is going on with that? There's a tremendous study from Live Free Illinois that talks about that. And so we are going to be talking with Ms. Artenise Myrick, who is their lead organizer, and of course, Pastor Stephen Thurston, who does wonderful work with them. And we're going to be talking with Dwight McKee about that. But first up, we've got you, Shapiro Wells. Very quickly, what is going on with you? We're moving into the prom season, although I did see snow on the ground yesterday.
Yes, Santita, with this crazy weather. But prom season really starts in April, the end of April through June. So please give us a call at 708-526-4546, 708-526-4546. We can handle all of your balloon arches as well as also your custom suite tables, your custom banners, and your treat table. So don't hesitate to give us a call, 708-526-4546. 708-526-4546. We look forward to serving you. Thank you so much, Santita.
Thank you. You know, before we pivot into talking about the police, because that is at the center of the conversation here for the Chicago campaign, but in New York, just all over the country, in Los Angeles, homelessness, you know, the homeless people, the unhoused have been unfairly accused of being more mentally ill than they are. Do you know how much it costs to live in L.A. or San Francisco or the O.C.? I mean, honestly, San Diego, oh my gosh. You cannot live in the city proper. It's too expensive, everybody. Of course, people who have work jobs that make nice money are struggling to live in the city. And then if you live in L.A. and increasingly in Chicago, you catch the devil trying to get on these expressways. These commutes are just awful. Think about that. And that's gas. That's money. It just goes out the window. But I was struck, as we are in this Oscar season, by one of the world's leading movie actresses, Tilda Swinton, who said, look, I was told to wear a mask on this set of this new movie I'm making in Ireland, and I'm not going to do it. Thank you very much. Dr. Shanina Knighton, in a couple of minutes, you have been talking to us about masks and really about how we should use these various products that can protect us, because we still don't use them properly. Dr. Knighton, she said, I'm over it. I'm not using these masks. They don't work.
Yeah, but they don't work, if you don't use them properly, you know, if those around you are not using them properly. And I think that's like the big thing that we don't talk about. So I keep going back to the fundamentals of hand washing, and this is something that we all can talk about. Or just cleaning your hands. You're supposed to clean your hands before you put a mask on. And when you put the mask on, you're supposed to put it on from ear to ear. When you're putting it on from ear to ear, it's supposed to cover from the bridge of your nose down to the bottom of your chin. And then when you are taking your mask off, you're supposed to clean your hands when removing it. And you're not supposed to remove it from the front. You're supposed to remove it from ear to ear. Santita, there has been a lack of effort in the media in regards to widespread education that talks about correct mask use, as well as the risk that masks can pose if they are not being handled properly. That is where the message to me has been missing, is because we don't talk about proper handling of masks. And I know before, like I mentioned, dropping them down beneath their chin to a chin girdle. And they pick up all those germs off their neck and put them right back up to their mouth and their nose. Of course you're going to be sick. When people say they don't work, I always challenge if they are using wearing it correctly.
Ear to ear, everybody, really. You've got to post something again on Hey Dr. Nina. Hey Dr. Nina. Dr. Nina, that is her handle. She shows you how to wash your hands, wear your mask. These are the things that you need to do. I mean, I don't wear masks everywhere, but in some places I do, because I walk in there and I'm like, ew, but there are places when you don't say, ew, I want to be careful. You need to be careful. You really do, but you need to wear the mask properly. Don't wear it up under your nose. And then just lift it up at will. You're not protecting anything. You're just wearing a mask. That's it. You know, and I have my decorative masks. You know how I am, Dr. Knighton. I have beaded masks and all of that. But under that, I'm wearing an N95 mask. I am. I'm disposing of them all the time. And yes, it does cost me money to buy these masks all the time, but that's what I want. And I wear the N95 because they cup around my mouth because I don't want to look like Baby Jane. Messing up my lipstick. I'm just keeping it 100. Plus, they're effective. Yes, I said it. Yes. Girl, please. Yes, I said it, and I'll repeat it. I didn't have my N95 at Pastor Thurston's church on Sunday. I was so mad and messed up my lipstick. Y'all look at this lipstick. I get it right in the lines. What? Yes. But, you really want but that's no joke for me. Seriously, I'm very serious about that. But you want to wear these things properly. You do. You do. And that's why you're here, to help us to understand what we're doing. Hey, Dr. Nina, Heydrnina. And so I am so glad. We love you, Dr. Shanina Knighton, and we do not take for granted that you are with us in the mornings, in between your husband, your children, and this major organization you're running. I mean, I hear you trying to get the whole family together, and I just love you. You know what? We are in the midst of this election season in Chicago, and at the center of the election conversation is crime, law and order. We're not talking about peace. That would be a more advanced, elevated conversation, a more mature one, but we're talking about being policed. You want the police to have your back. You don't want them on your back, but here we are. Law and order will have the police on your back, and that is not going to be a pleasant thing. Well, Live Free Illinois has a report, Killed, Ignored, Never Forgotten, Chicago's Unsolved Homicides. And we need to talk about that, everybody. We need to talk about that. You are twice as likely to get a murder solved in the white community than you are in the black community. What's up with that? While everybody's looking at us and saying, crime, you don't solve our murders. So we've got to talk about this. And we're so honored to have Artenise Myrick, who's the lead organizer for Live Free Illinois, joining, of course, Pastor Stephen Thurston. And I'm so grateful that you brought her and this organization into our presence, because we really need to know, just really have a serious conversation. A serious conversation about law and order, Pastor Thurston. I mean, because there is no order here, and no laws are being observed, and I'm saying the police aren't solving the crimes. I don't know what it is. Maybe people are not speaking to them, but I mean, are they? What's going on here?
What's happening is that our communities, black and brown communities, are at this intersection of being over-policed and underprotected. $1.9 billion, that's what it be, $1 billion is the budget of the police in Chicago. We're constantly adding to their budget. We're constantly seeking to add more police, but they're constantly not doing their job in our community, and it's a poor return on investment.
Well, Ms. Myrick, Artenise Myrick, lead organizer for Live Free Illinois, what did this report show us? Killed, ignored, never forgotten. Chicago's unsolved homicides. We got a lot of broken hearts out here. I can't even imagine. I mean, that's part of what, when you look at Willie Wilson, who is supporting Paul Vallis, and who said you need to hunt down these murderers and these criminals like rabbits, and he lost a lot of support over that in the black community because, hunt them down like rabbits, that's dangerous talk. It gives them license to come after us with a vengeance, which it's not hard for them to do, given the cultural disconnects and all of that. But that having been said, he has a son who was killed in 1995, to be fair, and the murder was never solved. I mean, so he's walking around every day trying to figure out what happened to his child. Now, I don't agree with his approach, but I can only say, Pastor Thurston and Ms. Myrick, that my goodness, I can only imagine what he's going through every day, because that is his child, everybody. Now, whatever you think about what he did and how he did it, he lost a child, and I'm not going to argue with someone who lost a loved one. I'm not going to do it. Ms. Myrick, what did this report show us? Killed, ignored, never forgotten.
This report showed us that racial disparities were at an all-time high when we're thinking about homicides. It's one thing for the Monday Night News to show that homicides are happening across Chicago's south and west sides, but they're also not telling that these homicides aren't being solved. Again, like Reverend Thurston said, if we're spending $1.9 billion, we want to know that this strategy is effective. And so clearance rates is the rate in which law enforcement actually solves these homicides. And the way that it's reported is totally unclear. Releasing accurate clearance rates promotes public safety by holding law enforcement accountable to the community. And if there's no indication that crimes are being solved, communities are left feeling unsafe, unprotected, while chaos persists. as elected candidates are talking about public safety, we want to know that our loved ones, if something happens, that there's a process that aims to support families with care while dealing with the system. We want to know that people aren't arbitrarily being locked away, but that the process is really aiming to get it right. We've also learned that Black women and girls, their homicides and they're becoming missing persons about 55% increase. And so we're really seeing some racial disparities. We're seeing the safety gap widen as communities like Lincoln Park are becoming more safe. Communities like Roseland aren't. And so that safety gap is getting wider. And so again, when we hear people call for more policing, we need to know that these strategies will actually work. Right? And we also want to know, where are the investment strategies? If, again, law enforcement are in Black communities and they're adding to the chaos and they're not helping, that also keeps community mistrust at an all-time high when it comes to interaction with law enforcement. And when Black men are the leading demographic for being killed by a homicide, the Black community needs answers as well. Black mothers need closure as well.
And Black mothers and fathers. I mean, and brothers and sisters and cousins and friends. You want to know, if something happens to your loved one, what happened? And I need to know that you are going, if you're going to be adding all these police, Ms. Myrick, you're going to add them to do what? I mean, just, is there a process for investigating a homicide? I mean, what is going on here? What is happening here?
I think that's exactly what people want to know. When we hear that the homicide clearance rate in Chicago across the board is below 50%, but it's as low as 6% in some neighborhoods, the communities want to know what's going on, like you said, right? But also, if the police can use the murder from 2001 to inflate the 2021 clearance rate, that is not transparent. Communities cannot know what's going on if the numbers that are being reported are inflated, and that if they're not also being brought to the table to help understand what this process is. And that's what we're aiming to do. We're in the infancy stages of conducting the research of, what is this process like? If this happens to your family in your community, what happens so that all families on both sides of the gun are being supported, right? Or how do we make sure that when our babies are going into this system, that, again, we can understand what this process is like, so that we can understand this, right? And that when mothers, fathers, aunties, cousins, like you mentioned, are being impacted by murders, that there's a process that we can take care of those families with care, and those communities with care. And not only that, we have access to resources for families who are dealing with this. And again, if we're looking at Austin leading homicides in 2022, this community needs resources. So how are we pouring $1.9 billion into the reaction of how homicides are happening? And we know that the process isn't happening over 50%. Then how are we looking at preventative strategies? How are we looking at pouring into communities and bringing more mental health and trauma services access to communities who are having high rates of violence? And again, how are we also looking at the through process when families are having to deal with burying their loved ones while interacting with police, while still not getting a lot of answers that they need?
Janice Myrick, everybody, lead organizer for Live Free Illinois. I want to know, what should it look like? I mean, what questions should we be asking these men who would be mayor? What do you want them to implement programmatically, or what are the laws already on the books, Ms. Myrick, that could facilitate these suggestions that you just put forth?
Absolutely. So first and foremost, we're pushing for an Office of Gun Violence Prevention that aims to bring investment to communities who are hardest hit by gun violence, that looks to streamline violence prevention services across the city, in neighborhoods, and on different blocks. So again, we're bringing more access to mental health, trauma care, and just overall healing and peace to communities, to Chicago's most vulnerable communities. And we're asking for the city to implement this strategy at $100 million so that we can ensure that families can get the help that they need. We also think that there's 89 recommendations that have been given to CPD through the PERF report that talks about different ways that we can improve the homicide clearance rates. Maybe we don't need to pay for more patrol officers, but we need more detectives who can be more specific on the needs of actually solving cases and not just being patrol officers, again, causing chaos in neighborhoods. Maybe we need to hire more civilians so we're not paying these super high pensions with police officers, but we can also have people from communities pushing more of the important intricacies of getting this case solved through. And so there's some small things that we can do as a city. We can actually make a commitment to funding gun violence prevention long term so that we can actually see the effects of what violence prevention can be, because oftentimes we've seen the city fund it for a couple of years or just a short period of time where we really can't see the long-lasting effects. And so I think the city has a real chance, especially with new administration, to really put their step forward in bringing prevention to the forefront of Chicago's public safety talk, and not criminalization, not throwing people away, but real investment that really reflects humanity in Chicago's residents and neighborhoods.
And look, because I'm going to tell you, the jails are full, the prisons are full. They're arresting people, but for what? For what? I mean, Pastor Thurston, you are the retired teaching pastor at Salem Baptist Church, which of course is located in the heart of the Roseland community. This is one of the most underserved communities in this particular space in the country. What is the relationship between, how do the citizens and the police relate to each other?
They don't. There is a total disconnect. There's a total disregard for human life. Even when officers are black, they see blue first. And so there's a lack of commitment to build relationship and rapport because there's a desire to bump numbers up in terms of prosecutions, in terms of putting black men and brown men in jail, because it's a numbers game and it's a money game.
Well, explain that. It's a numbers game, it's a money game. What do you mean?
The more black people and brown people that we can incarcerate, the more pockets are filled by white people who benefit from our enslavement.
How so?
We're familiar with the 13th Amendment. And slavery, on paper was abolished some time ago, but they just reworked the game. And the mass incarceration, where individuals are working for corporations for literally pennies a day. It's the new slavery. It's the new version of it.
And it's a DOJ program, by the way. The program is run through the Department of Justice to advance, or should I say to fatten the pockets of corporate America.
Yes, there's no incentive to bring healing and hope to our communities until and unless we continue to raise our voice, do what organizations like Live Free is doing, and support organizations like Live Free through our volunteerism, through giving money, through connecting the organization with our churches to help build out social justice ministries. It takes boots on the ground at the grassroots level to raise hell to those who have pen power, to make adjustments to policies so that our people can be made whole, can be made better, can be protected and preserved as a community.
773-763-9278, 773-763-WCPT. Are these candidates speaking to the issues as you need them to speak to the issues? Is anyone, or is it a combination of what they're proffering? Of course, Brandon Johnson, Commissioner Johnson, has come under a lot of criticism for, they've tagged him with defund the police. He said, I never said that. As a matter of fact, I'd like to hire more police, but I need psychologists, psychiatrists, EMTs, social workers. We need treatment, not trauma. Paul Vallis has just said, we need more police so that you can be safe. It depends upon whom you're talking to, Ms. Myrick. When I see a lot of police, as a black person, yes, I go, ooh, what's happening here? I don't necessarily feel more safe, even though I get along with everybody and I'm good, but I don't necessarily feel that safe. And if my nephews are with me, or if my godson's with me, they better stay close. Because I don't know which way this is going to go. I don't know. If we're pulled over by the police, keep your hands at 12 o'clock on that wheel. And let me turn on Facebook. That's the reality of where we are. What do you need a mayor of Chicago to do? And certainly while they're trying to be hired to become mayor, what do you need a candidate to lay out for you programmatically? Ms. Myrick.
For me personally, I want to see a candidate that is truly looking towards real investment, real pouring into communities. We've seen the city of Chicago practice economic apartheid. You could literally drive through the south and west sides onto the north side back to downtown and see the disparities of how people are living. And when you see communities who have great schools, great health care, great opportunities to job, you don't see heavy policing. You don't see this cry for economic investment. And you actually see communities thrive. So our communities need the same. What is the plan to create a real infrastructure where the people come first? Where's the plan where when people are crying for violence prevention, mental health treatment, not trauma, that they don't ask, well, they don't say we don't have the money. But when we're asking for public safety strategies, we have more and more money to throw at policing. I want to see the people come first in this next election. I want to see, I don't want to see political priorities take over what real people need. And I want to see policies that come down that actually reflect people and not criminalize people. And I think, again, we need to look into our youth. We need to look into our marginalized communities and ask them what do they need, and implement those strategies, because I think the solutions come from the ground, and that's why grassroots organizing is beautiful, because it puts the voice and the value into the people first, and then we build the strategies from there. And I believe that the next mayor and the person who's coming into administration needs to start with the people who live on these blocks first, not the bureaucratic top-down approach.
How can we get in touch with you, and how can we be active with you? And I want to have you on this show again. I can't thank Pastor Thurston enough for bringing you into our presence, because we need to hear your voice more and more and more, and we want to be involved in your work and be supportive of it, because, quite frankly, your work can save our lives. Arshanice Myrick, how can we get in touch with you?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me today. Thank you so much, Reverend Thurston. You can reach us at Live Free Illinois, that's Illinois spelled out, .org. And if you go to our staff page, you can find my email, Arshanice at Live Free Illinois. You can also follow our social media pages. We're on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook to stay up to date on what we're doing. And our website will have most up to date on our campaigns as well. And so thank you so much for having me this morning.
Well, you know what? I'm going to reach out to you. Rainbow Push is having pastor, and I want, of course, Pastor Thurston is going to be involved in that. We're having a mayoral debate. So far, Commissioner Brandon Johnson has agreed to be a part of it, but Paul Vallis hasn't yet, so we're going to continue to press to make sure that he's part of this debate. But I want you to be a part of it too, because we need to hear some solutions, right? We need to hear solutions. We need to know, and we need to know what the ask should be, Pastor Thurston. I got about 30 seconds for you, Pastor, because that's understanding power and how you use it, Pastor Thurston.
Yes, preachers, pastors, leaders need to understand the language of policy. And connecting with organizations like Live Free, like Rainbow Push, empowers you with the proper language, with the right questions to ask, and then with the right strategies to galvanize people, mobilize people, and then bring people to accountability who hold positions of power. And so we got to connect. We got to recruit. We got to bring it all together.
Amen, amen, amen. Well, I'm going to be calling upon you so that we can. I'd love for you to help us to pull together questions for the candidates for the March 31st Rainbow Push debate. But we're at the beginning of the day, from 11 to 1, WCPT will have a debate as well. But our debate's going to be at 7 o'clock in the evening. So, March 31st is going to be quite a day. We're going to hear a lot from these candidates, but we need to know what the ask is. When we get back on the other side, Pam, I'm going to let you come on. Well, I'm going to bring you up during the break so you can speak to these two brilliant people. Coming up, let's talk about these banks. Why did they fail? Again, back in just a minute. Jewel, could we bring up Pam?
Yeah, you want to bring up Pam as soon as we get after the break, or you want her right now?
I'm gonna bring her on now because I need to pivot to Dr. Wolf, because it's the banks. They failed. We need to
That is important. Okay, so you want to talk to her during the break right now? On
So
Facebook?
I can keep, like, she wants to address Pastor Thurston and Ms. Myrick. Pastor Thurston?
All right, I have her on for you.
Pastor Thurston?
I'm here.
Ms. Myrick?
On hold. Oh.
Ms. Myrick, stay right there, Pam. Is Ms. Myrick still there?
Okay.
She might have dropped. Oh, wow. I hope. Well, you know what, Pam?
She just dropped. I'm going to call her back.
Fantastic. Well, we have got Pastor Thurston. He can respond to your question or comment. What's up, Pam?
Sure. Thank you, Santita and Pastor Thurston. My concern, Santita, is always, and when I hear Paul Vallis talking about hiring more police officers, somehow that doesn't get it, because how are you going to discern whether or not these officers are, I guess, good officers or have ill intent? And many times we can't discover that until they have a knee on the neck or they're shooting one of our black youth 16, 17 times. And so when I hear hiring, I'm never hearing about the racial component to make sure these people are fit to work in different demographics other than white. And the other issue is this, Santita. Commissioner Brandon is speaking to me, to working class people. He's trying to come up with solutions investing in people. That's real. And when we discuss defunding the police, are we talking from the perspective that the Republicans and right wing ask the question? Or are we really talking about just reinvesting money and being smart with the money we invest with the police department?
Be careful with that, Pam, because I'm going to tell you, a lot of Democrats have signed on for that. Don't make it just a Republican thing. Don't because the person who presented the police Bill of Rights in the weeks after the Rodney King beating, the person who did that, who took the lead on that, was Joe Biden. No one has been more pro-police, and no one has sided with them more when they have been out of order than Joe Biden. Love him to pieces, love what he's doing right now.
Conservative, sure.
Yeah. No, because it's a certain position. It's not, that has nothing to do with party. But let me let Pastor Thurston respond to you.
So defunding the police, because people have twisted that language, it really looks like reinvesting money into mental health counseling, affordable housing, substance abuse treatment, education funding, job training. And so the police budget is bloated. There's a lot of waste. If you actually try to look into the budget and see where that money is being allocated, you would find a very deep black hole. It's very convoluted. It's very hard to see where all that money's going. And so we're asking that money be positioned properly to actually help the community. To the point you made earlier about hiring more police, if he hired more police, it's an 18-month process before they even hit the streets. Once they hit the streets, to the point that you made about their mental health and their perspective on racial issues, we have members of the police department now that has proclaimed publicly that they're members of the Proud Boys. And because of the way the contract is written, they cannot be dismissed. You can literally say, I'm a member of the KKK and the Proud Boys, and you can still maintain your status as an officer based upon how that contract is written.
And I think Commissioner Johnson would...
Oh, what happened?
She was out to say something good.
Oh, she was.
Okay, Pam dropped. I will, if she calls back, I'll put her right back on. But we have Dwight McKee now.
Oh, wow. Okay, well, we've got to get Dr. Wolf. Oh, wow. I'm sorry. We missed that part of the segment, Dwight. Ooh. But we're about to go into these bank failures.
They were calling me, but it wasn't coming through for some reason. They said they were calling me. I never got the call.
I'm going to give you a call-in number, okay?
Oh, what do you want me to do now?
No, nothing. Because we're going on to talk about these bank failures. If you want to weigh in on that, you're more than welcome to. And Pastor Thurston, if you'd like to do that as well.
Well, you tell me what you want me to do. I'm fine either way.
Okay, well, you can speak about it from the people's perspective, but I want him to explain what happened. Pastor, would you like to weigh in?
I can drop a comment too, but I'll follow behind Dwight.
Okay, we'll stay right there. You know, because I think it's being underplayed.
Yeah.
You know, it's not like 2008. Certainly, it's not like the Depression. All I know is that when you want a certain amount of cash out the bank, guess what? You got to sign papers, and you need to explain to the bank where your money is going.
Yeah.
And I know that these corporations, corporatists, got more than $250,000. And they were not even in the system. This is a crypto bank. Oh, come on now. They need to stop this. Stop it. But you and I, we can only get up to $250,000. And believe me, it's not going to happen over a weekend. No.
Miss Jackson,
yes.
We have Dr. Wolf on.
Dr. Wolf, you got me in mid-rant. I'm so mad I don't know what to do about this money. And I think about my great-grandmother Matilda Burns, my mama Tibby. And now I understand why she kept everything up under that mattress.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's an ideal solution, but...
Shoot, let me tell you something. She lived through the Depression, and she had to raise a child in it.
Yeah, well, before FDIC, this would have been the loss of all the deposits, right? Yeah. So without that federal regulation,
right.
Yes.
But no, let's definitely talk about it. Okay, I'm sorry. But of course, I have some people who wanna say something, of course, about this. This is Pastor Stephen Thurston. And Dwight McKee, who, of course, is one of your great admirers. Both of them are.
Likewise. I am. Not that I also admire myself. That does sound very bad, I realized, right after I said it. Yes. I also learned a lot from Mr. McKee. So.
All right, we have about 15 seconds. Stand by.
Don't you tell him all that. You don't learn nothing. I'm sound like my mother. You don't learn anything from Dwight. You know, my mother would say that. You're not going to learn nothing from Dwight. And then she's going to say, now, Dwight, what do you think? Stand by.
Change the world, change the world. Oh, yes, we can. We can change the world. We can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love. It's not too late. Gotta save the children. We can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show. It's March 14th, Tuesday, 2023. Let's talk about these banks. They are failing. We've been talking about law and order and why the police are failing. They're not solving murders in the black community. We got a lot to talk about on the Santita Jackson Show. Call us at 773-763-9278. Have these failures, 3 in one weekend. At least 6 are on the watch list of the FDIC. Many people in the economic space have been warning that something bad was going to happen, that the system was on the verge of collapse, that there are a lot of vulnerabilities and a lot of stresses in the system that are about to be actualized, that the system could give way. Is this a harbinger of that, or is this just a glitch in the system? I want you to call us at 773-763-9278. 773-763-WCPT on the Santita Jackson Show. Let's get to some of these headlines. In Chicago, it's going to be 33 degrees and sunny. Minneapolis, St. Paul, 32 degrees, mostly sunny. In the NBA, the Timberwolves, 136, the Hawks, 115. The Kings will be playing the Bulls tonight. In the NHL, the Bruins will be facing off against Chicago. The Wild have the night off, everybody. Well, everyone's talking about the banking collapses, and we're about to talk about that with Dr. Max Wolf. And, of course, Dwight McKee and Pastor Thurston have something to say because everybody's a little worried about their money in these banks today. Yes, we are. A rapidly intensifying nor'easter will bring heavy snow, winds, and coastal flooding in mid-March, everybody, across the U.S. Northeast, threatening widespread power outages and making travel impossible in some areas. As many Americans gear up for the spring break, vacations, and international trips, Texas state officials recently advised against travel to Mexico, citing the risk of cartel violence. The guidance comes just a few weeks after the high-profile kidnapping of 4 Americans in a case of mistaken identity that has drawn global attention to the country's security crisis. And those are just some of the headlines on the Santita Jackson Show. You know, we've been talking about financial freedom. Oh my gosh, yeah, we have. Now we're talking about finances today. Team Hochberg wants you to become a homeowner. I'm going to have David Hochberg on in another week or so that we're looking for 20 of you, so that we can get you out here and make you ready to buy a home. He wants to do that. And so He said he wants to be held to that, and we will do that. If you are a first-time home buyer, though, which means that you have not owned a home within the past 3 years, you need to call Team Hochberg, your trusted local lender, because first-time home buyers, the numbers have been declining. Last year it was 26% of home buyers who were first-time home buyers. The year before was 34%. The numbers continue to decline. So Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac want to turn these numbers around. They're staging an intervention, if you will, and they're incentivizing first-time home buyers with substantially lower rates. Now, these lower rates could be raised at any time, so you need to take advantage of this program right now. If you live in the Chicago area, for example, and you should call them even if you don't live in Chicago, call them at 855-56-DAVID, 855-56-DAVID, because they can help to point you to what is going to happen to you specifically. But in Chicago, you have to earn less than $105,700. Now, that's everybody in your household, partners, husbands, wives, girlfriends, whatever your partnership is. You have to have earned less than $105,700 within the past, and you cannot have owned a home in the past 3 years. Call Team Hochberg to see if you qualify for these amazingly low rates. Please call them at 855-56-DAVID, 855-56-DAVID if you've not owned a home in the past 3 years, and if you make less than $105,700. That is, the people who carry the load of the household, the husband, the wife, the husband, the partners. If you do that, you could qualify for this, everybody. So please call them at 855-56-DAVID, 855-56-DAVID, or go to 56david.com, 56david.com, and find out what this program is about. Indeed, you can get some generational wealth for yourself, for your kids, for your grandkids, if you become a homeowner. Think about that, everybody. So let's get to these banking collapses. We have seen the fireside chats began under FDR in response to the collapsed banking system. I mean, it just state by state, we just saw more and more banks. There was a run on banks because they didn't have any cash. They were illiquid. That's an oversimplification, but that's basically what happened. And so states started having these rolling banking holidays in Nevada, just in Michigan, every place. So when President Franklin Delano Roosevelt was elected in November of 1932, well, we had to wait till March 4th so he could be inaugurated. Well, he immediately went on the radio and had a fireside chat and said, look, we're going to stop this. We're going to take care of this. We're going to have a banking holiday. And in short, we're going to create something so that you never have this problem again. So out of this thinking, out of this moment came the FDIC. So our monies are guaranteed when we put them in the bank. But I want Dr. Max Wolf to talk to us about this because we need to know how this can happen with the bank. I mean, how this can happen, because banks clearly do more than hold on to our money. Apparently, they invest in financial products, and they're a business within themselves. And if you want to get money, more than a certain amount of cash from the bank today, Dr. Wolf, you got to tell them how much you must sign papers with the bank and tell them what you're going to do with your cash, which is insane to me. But there it is. What happened with these three banks? What happened with the second biggest bank closure in American history, SVB? And then you had three of these big banks close, SVB, Signature Bank, Silvergate, in the space of like 3 or 4 days. What happened?
So I think we might want to separate out Silvergate from Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank, only because one of these things is not a traditional bank. It's kind of a creature of the cryptocurrency, the blockchain world, which is extremely unstable and which has seen all the sort of quote-unquote most stable of its denizens, of very many of them, go to zero rapidly, taking all of the assets with them, unlike the public banks. So there is possibly a lesson here about the value of regulation, right? Because the regulated banks were able to give every single penny back to all of the people who put the money in there, beyond even the $250,000 limit, and there was only a matter of a day or so of lost functionality. So to some extent, while there's clearly things we could do better on regulation here, in the banking world, what the FDIC did, which no one wants to tell you, was a marvel. You would never see it in the private sector, where all of the checks, all of the credit cards, all of the deposits, all of the pending accounts were fully honored and seamlessly integrated within 12 hours by the federal government, right, at the Silicon Valley Bank. So obviously there was a regulatory misadventure here, and there's some things to learn, and maybe some of the loosening of those rules, much celebrated in the Rose Garden ceremony in 2018 by former President Trump. Maybe that was a bit premature or shocking, given the messenger there, not all that well thought out. So that's a good conversation. But there's also a conversation missing here that this was a marvel of the value of FDIC insurance, which, by the way, is not paid for by taxpayers, but is paid for by an insurance charge that banks pay on all their covered assets. So the public was not on the hook for that, and it was pretty seamless and pretty well executed. The regulation of the banks, not so much, right? So that of Signature Bank and of Silicon Valley Bank, where Silicon Valley Bank is much, much larger, many times larger, and Silicon Valley is just a much larger institution. 18th largest bank in the U.S. prior to its fantastic decline of last week, right? So it's a much larger institution. And in the world of tech, so I deal with them often. I have dealt with them often. My clients are often using it, They're very integrated into the world of the venture technology, the venture capital business, which was particularly hard hit. Signature a little bit. Signature's got more crypto exposure. Just for the record, because a lot of people are on TV talking about this, and I understand that, the Silicon Valley Bank was a California chartered bank, so it was regulated by the state of California. And they called the federal regulators in about 3 seconds before the bottom dropped out. So to be fair, the regulatory issues here might have to do with the state of California in that case a little bit more. It's definitely not the case with Signature, which is a New York bank, right? So it's not under California regulatory scrutiny, so I don't want to, tar California unfairly there. I think the other story that no one's telling you is that there's a weird rule about these banks, which seems to have been the problem in Silicon Valley Bank, which is a larger, which is they hold U.S. Treasury securities. That's the debt of the government, which our government has to issue because we don't want to tax people, particularly the rich. And this is going to shock everyone who are non-economists. I hope you're seated. It turns out really rich people have more money than other people. I know, surprising. And so if you don't tax them, you can't tax a lot of the money. Which seems to create a problem, right? And that problem means that the government has to buy things with money it doesn't have. And so it issues Treasury securities. It goes into debt, hence the $20 trillion with a T, the $20,000 billion in debt the U.S. government presently is in. In order to get banks to hold it as an inducement, when banks hold U.S. Treasuries, they don't have to mark those down to market. So they can just sort of hold them at value. And if that value moves around, they don't have to reflect it on their balance sheets. So that's normally not that big of a deal. But again, we've talked about on your show, and your listeners no doubt are well aware that the Federal Reserve has kind of done something interesting in the last year or so, which is to try to normalize interest rates that sat at incredible low rates for about 20 years. Right? So most of the last 20 years, really since the turn of the millennia, interest rates have been historically and internationally quite low here in the U.S., and banks have gotten used to it, and they bought a lot of these treasuries. When interest rates go up, the value of those bonds goes down. And so what happened is a lot of the security money on the bank's balance sheet has lost a bunch of value because interest rates have gone up the last, it's called 18 months. But they didn't show that. At the same time, they have a lot of deposits and they make loans, but now the deposits are starting to dry up because a lot of the deposits in Silicon Valley Bank are in the form of people making investments in startups. So people started taking a look at this and they started saying, they hold as capital Treasury securities, which have lost a bunch of value, but they haven't adjusted their books for that because they don't have to. They also have a lot of startups who are running out of money, who raised a bunch of money in the good days, which are a bit behind us for startups. Probably they'll come back soon, but not the best of days. And so they're not raising as much money. And if you're living off your bank account, like these startups are, you know what happens. Because those of you who are living off your bank account at home know what happened, right? You show up next Tuesday and a lot less money in there than you had kind of hoped because you've been spending it, right? And so if you have these guys drawing down the deposits, right, so the cash on the balance sheet's going down, and if you have some losses in your safe money there in the treasuries, which they do, then you're going to have some pressure. All that probably would have been okay. And then two things. And then a bunch of people in the venture community got nervous and started pulling their money out, right? And no bank will survive if people pull the money out. Banks are always kind of confidence related, right? You have to have confidence in them. That's why everything in the bank is named after something designed to give you confidence. Everything's a rock, this rock, that rock, black rock, white rock, big rock, forever rock tower, rock, everything, right? Solid, solid, solid. And the names of the products are bond, trust, covenant, right? All these things are be confident, right? And a little bit like the guy who tells you he's a great lover, it's never altogether true, right? And so they're telling you that they're forever, they're there for 1 million years, everything's marble because it lasts forever, reminds you of the old times as if they've been there since then, but of course you need confidence. And in a world of interdependence, all institutions fail fast without confidence. In the age of the internet, maybe even faster. And so they made a bunch of mistakes. They were probably not regulated as aggressively as they could have been. But the truth is, when a bank loses the confidence of its depositors and they take out as much money as fast as people did over the last few weeks at both Signature and Silicon Valley Bank, there's very little that you can do to save them. Now, you can save every penny on deposit, and you can keep all their functions up, which the government did. The wipeout here is if you own shares in any of these institutions, whatever value it was a few weeks ago, tens of billions and more, it is now $0.0, right? It's got all the raw value of a used postage stamp with less collector worth. So all the equity, all the investment in the actual shares of these companies has gone to zero. But all the investors are made whole.
But
That's my overview of the story.
But what happened? How is it that the banking executives, when you know the bank is about to fail, the CEO comes in and gives them all their bonuses? A bonus for what? We were just talking about this in the last segment, Pastor Thurston. We're talking about law and order. That's what these people are running on because the corporate media have shaped the narrative here in Chicago. We've got to deal with crime. The murder clearance rate in the black community is 21%. 1 out of 5 of us who get killed, the killer is found. I mean, come on, are you serious? How is it that you get a bonus when your bank failed? What? How does that work?
Sometimes it works in a simple way. People don't get a bonus for failing, right? At that point, the bonus is fully completed. Okay. They probably got a bonus for the past. Part of the story of Silicon Valley Bank was from about 2015, 2016, until it kind of went with no brakes into the wall a couple weeks ago, the bank had a startling performance. It grew very rapidly. It was quite profitable. And so, it was good days, and good days of bank performance have a tendency to translate into high bonuses. The other thing you might think about is if you have a compensation structure, which many of these banks and other institutions, by the way, pharmaceutical companies, large companies in general, where the senior management decides everyone's compensation, brace yourself, including their own, they sometimes seem to find that they've done a great job, right? And, this is the kind of issue that has sometimes made people say there might be a conflict of interest here in the compensation committee structures where the senior folks are deciding their own merit. And again, probably not astonishing to all the listeners, when people get to decide their own merit-based bonus, those bonuses can get pretty large, right? And that may or may not be connected to their virtue as employees. It may also be connected to the fact that they're fairly unaccountable and able to select their own bonus. Even some folks out there who are justifiably unhappy about this, given the right to select their own bonus, they might find themselves quite virtuous. It's a thing.
I just want to ask Dwight McKee and Pastor Thurston their reaction to what they've learned, because something is rotten in Denmark. I smell it, and I'm in Chicago. Pastor Thurston.
This was super informative. Thank you for the economics lesson and breaking things down in such a palliative way. Question for you. So for the average person who does not have more than $250,000 in a bank account, does this even matter to them? Should it matter to them? And if so, why?
It's a fantastic question. I don't want to be super arrogant. I'm not sure if the question was for me or for Santita or for you?
No, it wasn't for me.
I don't know. You have something to say, too. One thing I do think is important is people think the world of money is more mysterious than it is and requires more expertise. And compromised experts do weaponize that against the general public, right? So I think that is worthy of note here. And when I teach this class, the one thing I'll say to my grad students is always that, like, the banks are not that different than other places. If a few people tell you that they had stomach trouble after they ate at the Crab Shack, you're not going there anymore. And if it's not true, it still kind of hurts because you're not going there anymore. Neither is anyone else that talks to you. Because some news spreads fast, right? And hey, the bank's out of money. That's not the kind of thing people keep to themselves, right? So these confidence things can move really fast. The better question, and you ask the best question. If you're not a depositor, why does it matter? So it matters enormously, right? 2 reasons. One, the structural reason. In a market economy, pain rolls downhill. So what happens at the top of the hill is always your business. Because if someone is rolling something that's not so desirable down the hill and you live on the bottom of the hill, it's coming your way. The other thing is what is about to happen here is that all these banks are going to tighten up how many loans they give out, right? They're going to see the world as more risky, and they're going to say no more. They're going to give smaller loans, and they're going to charge people more to borrow that money. And that affects anyone out there who works for an institution who's borrowing money or who themselves might want to borrow money, right? And so this has a contractionary or reducing effect on the economy. So, for instance, if you work in or around Northern California, New York, Boston, the big venture hubs, if you work in a tech business, you're more likely to see a leaner bonus for yourself and layoffs because of this. And that's where this filters into the real world. Last place is all the taxable activity generated by these institutions goes to zero. And so the government ends up helping the people at these banks who lose their jobs and not having those jobs to tax and those institutions to tax. So less money for the public coffers and less sort of hiring and maintenance of benefits and salaries for real people in their real everyday jobs. Last thing I'll remind you, people have this image of everyone who works in a bank as rich, but the majority of people who work in the bank do back office stuff and teller stuff, and they work real hard for, the lordly sums of $40,000 or $50,000 a year with mediocre benefits. So they are not wealthy and powerful, dripping with diamonds. They're working to make the rent, and there's usually too much month at the end of the money. Because most people work in banks are not tycoons.
Absolutely. Can we're going to talk with John Nichols. He's going to be talking about the political fallout. But if the pastor and Dwight McKee can stay with me, and I know that I'm catching you in the middle of your day because you've already been going for several hours, not just with your work but with your family. Let's talk about this because Dwight, I want you to weigh in on this, and I want everyone else to weigh in on this. What about these bank collapses? I mean, the fact is, you've had a lot of people who've been sounding the alarm. Something's going to happen. The stresses in the system are there, and the system is going to collapse. And some people are saying, I told you, and we're at the beginning of the bad part, not at the end of it. What do you think? Are you nervous about your bank account now? Think about that. 773-763-9278. 773-763. WCPT, The Santita Jackson Show. Dr. Wolf, thank you for breaking it down.
I think there's probably a lot of good questions out there.
Oh.
And I know that some people will kind of fall back on some hard, one factor there is about banks being disingenuous. That may or may not be true, but I think it's always a little bit of a mistake just because I think this is more of a sort of social thing here, right? This is more about interest rate policies and about loss of confidence and about sort of loosening regulatory. It's not so much, again, there were probably there were clearly some quite poor decisions at these institutions, but this is broader, I think, than just sort of the blow by blow of a particular institution.
See, I mean, with Dodd-Frank, and I realized Trump rolled Dodd-Frank back, and you had Democrats who wanted Dodd-Frank to be rolled back too. I mean, look, I do not put this in the basket of the Republican Party, Dwight McKee and Pastor Thurston and Dr. Wolf. This, you have corporatists who are driving this, and it's made us all vulnerable and, quite frankly, anxious. I was at my bank yesterday, and I said, "Now, do I need to get anything out of here?"
Miss Jackson,
Yeah.
so we have John Nichols up for you.
Your bank isn't Silicon Valley Bank, or is it?
No, it's a community bank, which are under stress. Thank you, my board operator.
I have a quick question for
I
you.
know you do. Go on.
Sorry.
Don't apologize. Go on.
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. But yeah, so Alex did a great job. He brought up John Nichols. But yeah, so we were wondering, did you do the Hochberg live read?
Yes,
did I just
did.
miss it?
Yes, I did. At the
You
top.
did it right at 7?
I'm not
when you
right
came back at 7?
right after the headlines.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I just want to make sure I didn't know
it.
if I missed it or what.
Yeah,
Okay.
I did.
All right.
So please pull it and give it to me. I thought you were going to ask a question about the banks.
No, but Alex and I are sitting here talking about it.
Bless your hearts, but I did do it. Just before we started this conversation.
All right, great. We have about a minute and 45 seconds.
John Nichols?
Yes.
You've got a full house
I'm
today.
with you.
You hear Dr. Max Wolf. We're just
I
going to
did.
continue this conversation about the banks because that has got everybody a little freaked out today. Dwight McKee is here, as is Pastor Stephen Thurston. He just retired as the teaching pastor of the largest black church in the state of Illinois, but he is now at New Covenant, a pulpit that is almost 100 years old. In fact, his grandfather was one of Dr. King's best friends. Dr. King called him boy baby because they all look like, at 70, they look like they're about 30. And so Stephen is frozen in time. He looks like a teenager. Okay? He looks like a kid. And he will look like a kid forever because genetically he's programmed to look like a kid. But seriously, I mean, very studied, went over to Oxford to study and all of that. And so what he does with his ministry is he brings a lot of social work of that background. He also understands economics, and he really helps to bring everyone he talks to it just up to date. And of course, Dr. Wolf, and one of the most brilliant social scientists we have ever known is Dwight McKee. He's one of the founding members of Operation Push. He and Aline Walker were the youngest members of the board, along with John Johnson and George Johnson and all of these vaunted figures, and Jackie Robinson. But he was head of the youth division, and such was my parents' respect for him was
Stand
so
by.
profound. Thank you. They couldn't have an organization that they founded without him being on the board. Stand by.
Change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world.
Hey everybody, back with the Santita Jackson Show on WCPT 820, the nation's largest progressive talk radio station. I am Santita Jackson, and it is a joy to talk with you, but the topic has got everybody a little nervous as we talk about these bank failures, and 6 banks at least that are on the FDIC watch list. How did the Dodd-Frank regulations, how is it that they were overturned? And don't say it was just the Republicans, and don't say it was just President Trump. No, corporatists did it, and they are in the Democratic and Republican Party. So just stop, please. Don't go down that road. We need to know how we got here again, and how we can stop this from happening. Of course, John Nichols is with us. Dr. Maxwell stayed with us. Dwight McKee, we haven't heard from him. I can't wait to hear what he has to say. And Pastor Thurston. And let me speak with Eric Bloom real quick. You said, why am I so proud to be white? Because the worst people on earth tell me I shouldn't be. That's not true. Stop it. If you want to be provocative about something that is thought-provoking. That's ridiculous. Everybody, God made you as God made you. Nobody's upset with you being white. What you don't like is for people to flex their power in a way that hurts people. So just stop it. And it's been the Europeans' turn to do it. And they need to stop. And quite frankly, no one on earth has gotten this power thing right. Otherwise, the world would not be where it is. So just stop. If you want to add to the conversation, add to it. But don't do something that is destructive. Nobody cares that you're white. You're one of God's children. That's enough for me. I'm done with that. In fact, I've got 2 good white friends on with me right now. Ha! Okay, John Nichols. Dr. Max Wolf. I'm so tired of that. I'm tired of that conversation because it's an immature conversation. We're talking about black, white, brown, yellow, and red people, straight and gay and trans, and their money. So whatever you feel about anybody, I don't want people to starve today. And I don't want people to be anxious today. Like my great-grandmama, who you knew, Dwight McKee, I now understand why everything that was of importance to her was up under that mattress. and she'd look around to make sure you weren't looking, and her right arm would sweep under that mattress. She'd pull a little something out. But she lived through the Depression, everybody. And when you live through that, when everything around you collapses, when you've got bread lines going down miles, that's a horrible thing. And essentially, we have that today. People are in a lot of pain. People can't go to the hospital in a pandemic. And we haven't even figured out universal single-payer health care. We have not figured out a health care system in a pandemic with an airborne disease. Come on. And now I can't get my money? Oh, well, I can get my money, but I'm scared. Because banks are given space, John Nichols, that people are not given. And these people in this crypto bank, Dr. Wolf, they got more than $250,000, and I'm not saying they didn't need it. But, I can't do that. If I want more than X amount of dollars, I've got to not only fill out papers at the bank, I have to tell them what I want the money for. My money. Oh, John Nichols. Before I come to you, John Nichols, I want Dwight McKee to react to what he's been hearing, because Dr. Wolf, of course, has broken this down for us so that we can understand it in a way that is palatable. Dwight McKee, your thoughts?
Well, I think that Dr. Wolf, in his descriptions of the banks, left out one rock. Didn't include one rock, and that's Rocky. It looks as if this situation is pretty rocky. And so I just got 2 questions for him. One is that, didn't Yellen know when she raised the interest rates that she was going to create these kind of unintended consequences? And secondly, Doc, when is a bailout not a bailout? That's a little confusing to me. Because it looks like a bailout to me, but the president keeps saying, no, it's not a bailout. Can you interpret that for me?
Sure. So probably the bailout one is the harder one. So I'll do the Federal Reserve. So Yellen isn't the Federal Reserve anymore. It was. She was the governor of the Federal Reserve until Jerome Powell took over, who's been the sort of hand on the wheel here for all these interest rate hikes. So when they raise these interest rates, they know that there is a risk that some banks fail. It doesn't usually happen a lot, but it could. And the problem is raising interest rates is how they fight inflation. And when the Fed got massive pressure from lots of people, and we've had this conversation on here a lot, when you pressure the Federal Reserve this hard to cut inflation, they're going to break a few things. Right? What they teach you if you do monetary policy is monetary policies tightening like this to fight inflation usually don't run their whole course, because once the tightening breaks something in the economy, you stop. Right? So sometimes there's also this notion that economic policy is this precise thing, like fine-tuning an elegant engine, but it's not. It's social science. It's intervening in the chaos of hundreds of millions of people making unpredictable and sometimes unwise decisions, and thousands of corporations and dozens of other major trading economies, and all those moving pieces. It's sort of an almost infinite complexity. And so the law of unintended consequences is the law of all major policy decisions. And, monetary policy, the adjustment of interest rates, is certainly an area where the law of unintended consequences is not banishable. It's not irrelevant. in terms of the bailout question, I mean, as all things, and I may sound slippery, but I don't mean to here, it all hinges on how you define a bailout. The federal government makes available regulations and very inexpensive insurance to back depositors, because having faith in the banking system and having functioning banks is essential to the economy. That is true. And if people lose faith in the banks writ large or pull their deposits out, they will create potentially cataclysmic economic downturns with mass unemployment and all that kind of stuff. And the stories that Santita is sort of referencing as formative of her grandmother's opinions about money and valuables. And
my great-grandmother. Yeah.
Sorry.
Because she was she was raising a child in the Great Depression. That's why I was making that clear.
Got it. So those kind of traumas, which are often, by the way, intergenerational. Generations go through this, and even, if it's your great-grandmother raising your grandmother or her siblings, they may have direct recollections, and they'll have heard the stories, and it'll have been formative of the people who formed them, right? So those have long cascades. But, so we have assistance on insurance for these banks, and they received all that and more because they were deemed strategically important for the stability of the financial system, at least Signature and Silicon Valley Bank were. They might be. And when we didn't repeal Dodd-Frank, which is good. We loosened the restrictions. It actually said you could be a bigger bank and not be regulated as though you were systemically important. And so, for instance, Silicon Valley Bank would have been regulated heavily by the federal government, not the California state regulated like it was, if they hadn't weakened those provisions in 2018 to basically let banks be much bigger before they faced more oversight. Right? And the idea being, if you're big enough to cause a systemic problem, you should have systemic oversight, which does make sense. And that was loosened 5 years ago, I guess, under President Trump, although it did receive Democrat and Republican support in the Senate. And actually, the person who's probably been most eloquent about talking about that since back then was probably Senator Warren.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I mean, she said this, she saw this coming, and she said, do not bring Jerome Powell back, at least don't put him there, because he's at the center of this mischief. He's basically an agent of the banks. And boy, oh boy, here we go. John Nichols, national correspondent for the for the Nation magazine. I see a political storm a brewing. There's an old song from the Black Church. There's a storm out on the ocean. Can I get an amen from Dwight and Pastor Thurston? And it's moving this old way. If your soul's not anchored in the truth, you will surely drift away. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it says soul anchored in Jesus, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I see it. I see the storm. It's out there. Can I get an amen from all of you, including you, my unchurched, beloved Dr. Wolf? Amen. Amen. Amen.
Amen.
Okay. Thank you. All right. You have to mess with Max. That's a private joke. But I mean, I just feel like this is a mess. John Nichols.
Mm-hmm. Well, it is a mess. Okay. And it's interesting that you make the reference to a storm coming. We know that to be the case because we've been here before. We had a storm in 2007, 2008. We saw it coming. It did come. It was devastating, not just for banks, but remember, for our whole economy. We ended up in a situation where we had massive unemployment. The promise of Barack Obama's presidency was undermined by that reality. You know, remember that when he came into the White House, we were losing jobs at an astronomical rate. Many of the goals that he had as president had to be, put to the side so that he could deal with this intense crisis. Not a crisis he created, but a crisis he inherited. And so what we have to understand is that these bank meltdowns aren't just bank meltdowns. They are economic meltdowns, or at least they have the potential to be so. Now, we don't know where everything that's happening now will go, but we do have to recognize that there's tremendous political ferment here. And what happened in 2007 and 2008, where our Congress decided to bail out the banks and the multinational corporations, but didn't take care of working class people who were losing their homes, didn't take care of communities that were struggling, didn't take care of small businesses that were ruined, didn't take care effectively and sufficiently of people who were losing their jobs, their livelihoods. It lasted, right? It became a political churn, and it was still a reality in 2016 when Bernie Sanders ran and did so much better than expected, when Donald Trump ran and did so much better than expected. It remained a ferment, through that period. And so when we look at what's going on now, what we have to understand is that this bank meltdown, even if it's just a few banks at this point and a few more on watch lists, has the potential to shake our politics from top to bottom. And for progressives, for people who want to, A, do good for society, but B, also to have good results, not just in elections, but in governance, this is a time to be very much on the alert and to recognize that they shouldn't fall into traps of partisanship, right? As you pointed out, as Professor Wolf has pointed out, this Dodd-Frank reform was undermined in 2018, not merely by Republicans, but by a coalition of Republicans and corporate Democrats. In the U.S. Senate, 17 Democrats joined 50 Republicans in voting to effectively deregulate a lot of banking, especially for banks of the size of Silicon Valley. In the House, 33 Democrats joined with the Republicans in voting to do this. They helped to clear the way, and they didn't listen to Elizabeth Warren, as you've mentioned, to Bernie Sanders, who went to the floor of the Senate in 2018 and read the Congressional Budget Office report into the congressional record, said, look, they are saying to us, if we do this, we are going to create vulnerability. We are going to effectively create the circumstance we are now in. These folks are not visionaries. They're not seers. They just simply read the reports. They looked at the past and at the data they have, and they said, don't do this. It's going to be incredibly dangerous. The reality is we did it. And now the question is, who do we listen to at this point? Do we listen to many of the same folks who got us into this problem, right, who preached deregulation and preached soft approaches to big banks? Or do we start to listen to the people who got it right in 2018, people like Katie Porter, Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, and many others? Or do we make the mistake again? The thing that should happen right now is that in addition to all the things Professor Wolf has talked about, ways to try and ease this crisis and try and deal with it in the immediate moment, we should reverse those deregulations. Those deregulations have to be undone. In fact, Dodd-Frank was not a strong enough law. That's an important thing to understand. But at least we should get back to that and then take a step further. Second, we should revisit how the Federal Deposit Insurance Company operates and re-examine it. It needs to be reformed so that it doesn't become a bailout mechanism, not just for banks, but for investors who are irresponsible. And remember, what we're talking about now is a situation where the federal government is backstopping investments over $250,000 from folks who are often speculators and bad players. It's not just small businesses that are being helped at this point. So we're in a dangerous place where we're setting a precedent that you get some sort of government help, even if you've been incredibly irresponsible as an investor or as a bank. And so that's the second thing. And the third thing I would emphasize, and this is the hardest of all, is we do need Federal Reserve reform. And this is something that especially Senator Sanders has talked about for a long time. The Federal Reserve has an oversight responsibility that it hasn't lived up to. In fact, that it has failed in, not once, not twice, but repeatedly. And so at this point, looking at the Federal Reserve, A, doing immense oversight on it, using the power of the Senate especially because I think that's where you'd have the stronger oversight, I hope. But using the power of the Senate and the House to do oversight on the Federal Reserve in the current moment to make sure that they do a better job of regulating. And then secondly, to do genuine reforms, because the Federal Reserve should not operate in the way that it does. And if we don't do these three things, and there are many other things we can talk about, but if we don't do these three things in this moment, and that is return to adequate regulation, look at the Federal Reserve, make sure that we get it right, and reform the FDIC. If we don't do that very, very quickly, then even if we get through this turbulent few weeks, few months without a downfall or something really awful, we will be in this circumstance again. It is only a matter of time. And so this is an urgent moment for immediate action, but also for congressional action.
But you know, John and panel, we see that
can't be audited.
We see the hypocrisy here. I'm sorry, Dwight. What now?
Yeah, can you explain to us why the Federal Reserve can't be audited?
It should be audited.
Well, Dr. Wolf?
By law, it can't be.
It has an internal audit. I think the conversation might be about an external audit.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, because, but if I say that, then they put me with Ron Paul, and then they've demonized him and say awful things about him. But people who ask questions that I think need to be asked get demonized. Why can't we audit them? Why can't we find out who they are? They're a bunch of banks. They're not some federal government agency. I need to know how they oversee my money. I want to know how it is that a crypto bank got guaranteed more than $250,000. I can't even get money out the bank unless I answer questions to them about how much cash I'm getting, why I need this cash, and what I'm going to spend it on. And I can't get $20,000. I got to go to the Supreme Court to get money to excuse me for $20,000 worth of $100,000 or $200,000 worth of loans or more. I mean, the hypocrisy is just... It is mind-boggling.
It's jaw-dropping. And let me, in response to Dwight's question or good thought here, it's very important to understand where the Federal Reserve came from, right? When was the Federal Reserve created? Back around the early years of the 20th century, around 1913. 1913. At roughly, or exactly, the same time that we created an elected U.S. Senate, right? Where we finally began to democratize, not perfectly by any measure, but we finally began to democratize our legislative processes in the United States to take it out of the back rooms and give the power to elect to the people. Well, then suddenly, at that time when we're sort of in a progressive moment, we're democratizing, we create the Federal Reserve and say, well, yeah, we're democratizing a lot of stuff, but we want to take the economics out and move it over to a place where the people don't have much say, right? Where the people are kind of extracted from the process. So the bankers, the CEOs, the very powerful folks who still have dominion over core economic decisions in the direction of our country in that regard. If we understand it in that context, then we should recognize that there is a progressive case for a reassertion of the people's will and the people's voice as regards economic decisions. This is what Franklin Roosevelt was talking about when he referred to economic democracy. We don't have it in America. And as we look at all of these issues, we really should ask ourselves, do we want to have a Federal Reserve that operates in the way that it currently operates? Because it has not once, not twice, but frequently failed, made bad decisions, and made decisions that ultimately ended up costing this country a great deal. And yet, at the end of the day, that cost was borne by the taxpayers, not by the wealthy and the powerful. And so this is a time where we shouldn't shy away from deep and fundamental discussions about how to create a more equitable economic system in this country. And that's not, it's a nice slogan, right? Economic democracy. But we have to go deeper. And that does get into the area of, as I said, regulations of banks, reform of the FDC, and a genuine revisiting of how the Federal Reserve operates.
Dr. Wolf, well, let me get about 30 seconds for everybody, and then I'm going to end up with Dr. Wolf and John Nichols, who's here every Tuesday. And Dr. Wolf, of course, will be back here on Thursday, no doubt, talking about this, unless something else happens, and it certainly can in these times. What is your 30,000-foot view and even your weeds view, Pastor Stephen Thurston? What do you say to so many of our people? It's hard to get a bank account now, so, there's that.
Yeah, of course, in our community, financial literacy is a major impediment to people moving forward. And it's matters like this, issues like this, where we need to stay in tune and in touch, connect with experts like you've presented us with here, who can inform our people so that as they rise, as they grow, as they develop in their finances, they can understand the nuances of what's happening and how policy, I always go back to policy shapes a whole lot of stuff that we're just oblivious to because we're focused on the wrong stuff. And this is the stuff we need to really be dialed into.
Absolutely. Dwight McKee, 30 seconds.
Well, the purpose of the Federal Reserve is to protect the value of the money, not to protect the people themselves. And so we always pay the consequences because when there's crises like this, it's the people that suffer. The money is saved and the people are sacrificed. And so we need to have a major adjustment in the regulation of the Federal Reserve and the way the system is set up with these banks that have been given carte blanche to make all the money they can on bad investments and speculation. But then when it goes bust, then we come in, the government comes in through us and save them from ruin. They have all the benefits of the rewards, but none of the risk of the bust.
Privatize their wins, publicize their losses. It's an awful thing. I mean, Dr. Wolf, 1 minute.
Yeah. I think there are a lot of details, and unfortunately in this area, details matter, but I don't disagree with anyone here on sentiment. So I do think the banks in question here are wiped out. They're gone, matched, liquidated. The institutions don't exist anymore, but the investors were made whole. And I think the other thing to think about maybe is banks work for someone. It's a little bit like when you talk to people about how expensive athletes' salaries are, and people get real worked up about the numbers. And yes, the numbers are sometimes pretty huge, pretty crazy, but those numbers are being paid for by someone else who the banker or the athlete works for, who wins no matter what happens in the game. Maybe those are kind of fruitful conversations. And in terms of the Federal Reserve, there's one reason to keep it independent, which is important. So you have to balance that, which does not nullify anything that Mr. Nichols or anyone else said, which is you don't want the monetary policy made by the Congress, because as much as the Federal Reserve has made plenty of mistakes, I don't know if that serves to distinguish it from the U.S. Congress. And because the Federal Reserve is not democratic often and has impulses to protect the wealthy at the cost of the many, again, I think, regrettably, I'm not sure that serves to draw a bright line between the Federal Reserve and our beloved Congress.
I've got about 30 seconds for you, John Nichols. Take us out.
This has been a very wise discussion. It's a discussion we should be having on this show, but it should also be taking place at the highest levels and in Congress and throughout our politics. We shouldn't just look at the collapse of this individual bank. We should see the systemic problem and look for good responses that can make sure that it doesn't happen again in the future.
And bail out the American student. How about that?
Well,
bail them out. Yeah. Bail out the American worker. Bail them out. How about that? Take care of Americans while you're waving the flag. Wave that. I love you, everybody. Can't wait to be with you again on the Santita Jackson Show. God bless you, everyone. And bless God by blessing someone else. Just be kind, everybody. Be kind. Love you so much. Have a great day. You all want to say anything before I have to run? I have to finish packing. I've got to go to Kevin Gray's service. John, and Max, I do not want to go to that. Oh, boy.
Yeah. I think the return of child labor will solve these economic problems, and I'm very excited that Sarah Huckabee Smith has had the guts to stand up to those tired 14-year-old kids on the kill floor and tell them, another shift, my son. I think that's what we need. That's our economic revitalization. We don't need the banks We need more of that 19th century. We're really bringing back the 19th century. The Donald was important, but this is really exciting. This is like kind of 19th century redux with the internet. Love it.
Oh, you know what? You have to understand.
It's time to get the nanny state from keeping these kids in these non-functioning schools and just send them to charter schools or to the factory floors.
Unbelievable. The nanny state. And now we're bringing putting the children back in the sweatshops. Have we not learned anything?
No voting.
No. Back in the fields.
Yeah, don't let them vote. Yeah.
Just working. Just working.
No, but I mean, because in slavery, that's what we did. Let's not act like it, because we keep looking at, the sweatshops from the early part of the 20th century and the end of the 19th century. Child labor was a very real thing in slavery. You started
America
working
was built by children
at birth. Okay.
Not just people of color, but also children of color. Right?
Yeah. But I'm saying in the United States, that's what we do. That's what we do. You built this country, this economic super engine, by not paying people and abusing them. It's not going to work, everybody. Don't you know it's a failing
better
model?
than a child.
Oh,
Yeah.
and pay their parents, Max. Good grief. You work all these hours.
They're going to take their parents' jobs.
Oh, boy. Yeah. You got to watch that.
Making this seem like a very dystopian moment, my friend.
It is. So
you get rid of those workplace regulations, they won't have to retire because they'll never be alive then.
But John, it is dystopian. This is crazy.
Well, it is. And look, it has been for a long time. This is the important thing to understand. We have these discussions, and look at where we're going to these much deeper issues. We have these discussions when a crisis occurs. But the reality is that our normal, quote unquote, our status quo has been a degeneration in the basic protections for workers, for children, for people across the board. Look at what happened in the last 20 years in this country. We've seen a full-on attack on union rights. Right? We've seen state after state become a right-to-work state. We've seen undermining of public employee collective bargaining. This incredible pressure on unions to make sure that they can't organize, they can't collectively bargain. Now we're having a little bit of a comeback. We're starting to see unions, assert themselves. Michigan just overturned or is in the process of overturning its right-to-work law. But the fact of the matter is, we've gone down so far that, in many ways we need a new deal and more just to get back to, what was accepted a few years ago, not that many years ago. And I say that because a banking crisis, right, is one that is immediate. People do worry, can they get their money and things like that. But we need to learn to talk about an economic crisis.
Absolutely.
This broader sense of an ongoing economic crisis. And this is a point where we've got some potential for it, but we can't get lost in the minutia of what's going to happen with Silicon Valley Bank or what's going to happen with some other bank. We have to focus on the deeper systemic problems. And the fact of the matter is, we also have to focus on the most fundamental of all these problems, which is, why did the banks succeed in getting that deregulation? They succeeded because they used their money and their CEO's money to finance campaigns and to flood Capitol Hill with lobbyists, hire former members of Congress and former members of presidential administrations, Democrats and Republicans, to lobby for something that was bad for the American people. Yeah. That's a fundamental reality. Our campaign finance system, our lobbying system, is set up to allow the very, very wealthy, very, very powerful to use their money to undermine the public good.
Well, and we want to continue to make this, as you say, we want to individuate the problem. It's a systemic problem. And it's also encoded in our DNA. I mean, the country was founded on abuse. We abused people. We took them off of their land. We've done that. We enslaved people, made people indentured servants, and then we racialized slavery so that we could become this economic super engine and become this great country, not paying people, making them have your babies, all kinds of abuses. It needs to stop. We need to acknowledge it, See, when you don't acknowledge it, Max and John and Dwight and Pastor Thurston, when you don't acknowledge it, you continue to repeat it because you can act like it did not happen. This is how, not only did it happen, this is how we do it. Yeah, the Chinese building the railroads, you know they were abused.
And then I have to go.
Yes, please say.
We didn't become a wealthy, powerful country because we stole the land or because we enslaved the people. We became a wealthy and powerful country despite that. Some of us got rich on that, but that's not what made America strong. So we can be stronger without that. I do think some people think you're choosing between doing the right thing and doing the profitable thing, and I don't think it always works like that. Sometimes, but quite often not. Quite often the better thing to do that includes more people, that broadens the tent, is actually also economically better. And I think sometimes people are given this sort of false alternatives here where it's like, hey, be wealthy and successful or do the right thing. And I think that's just a way to convince people that they're better off when they do the wrong thing. And usually it's a very small number of people who benefit from that. And so the only objection I'd have, and I know you don't mean it, but sometimes the phrasing, it's not in our DNA, it's in America's history. And we didn't get rich because of those abuses. We got rich despite them. And we can be richer in a larger number of senses and ways of being rich without them. So I just want to make sure that prosperity, all my dark humor notwithstanding, is not really going to be enhanced by child labor. Like, these things do not make us rich.
Oh, well, no, there's no question about that.
Even financially, let alone, whatever spiritual or decency type regard.
But the majority have been lied to, Max. Yeah. And you're absolutely right. And they have been told that they're special and that this is how this works. And it is an awful thing. You and I have talked for years about being able to do well and do good. You don't have to make money at the expense of someone else. You don't. You don't have to do well at the expense of someone else.
You can't be rich enough to unbreak your world or not be victimized by the effluence you pump out into it with your avarice and your misadventure, right? Because rich people lose money too, and they're victimized by these things too, which is not the reason to care. It's just that there are no individual solutions to social problems. And that, I think, is America's curse. This effort to be wealthy enough, to be powerful enough, to find the individual solution to the social problem. And not only is that not generous to the other people who, of course, don't get your solution, but it also fails you. And I somehow think, maybe I'm wrong, but that last piece matters too, that there is no buying your way out of it, right?
That's right.
So, and America's also big enough, you can't even really run away from it. The undertow from this ship, if it goes down, will get you in the four corners. But I apologize, and I don't mean to dominate or sort of ruminate too loud and then hop off the phone, because I know that's excruciatingly rude, but I do have another appointment to which I'm now meaningfully late. So thank you all. Always a pleasure to learn from you, and sorry to...
No.
I know that's untoward.
Before you go, let me say that the most profound thing that I learned today is that John Nichols is white. I was shocked.
Me too. I learned I was white. You think it was easy with John? I mean, John might have already known. I'm not that self-aware. I just found out on the air. So yeah, it's a tough day for me as well. All right, guys.
Oh, gosh, it's a tough day, Lord have mercy. Oh, God.
It is good to be with all of you.
Well, I love you, and you know what? We are family. That's the beautiful part of it all, and that's the beauty of it. That's the beauty of it. White, black, brown, yellow. What does Reverend say? Red, yellow, black, brown, and white. We're all precious in God's sight. We're all one family. We're all one human family. And so, I'm glad that you found out you're white, and I'm glad that you found out he's white, and it's a good thing. So you don't have to apologize for it. I mean, because and I want to say to my morning stars, I've seen some comments and many people getting dangerously close to being racist. I don't tolerate that here. We don't talk about whitey, et cetera, et cetera. I don't want to do that. I'm not, and you know what? Because of the pejoratives that have been lobbed at my people, not because of that, it's just wrong to try and diminish someone. Just stop it. If you want to have that conversation, have it someplace else, but do not have it here. That is not welcome. And I will invite your leave if you do it one more time. We don't do that here. We're all God's children. Period. That's it. That's all. And what we're trying to do is elevate here. I met John. I don't even know where. I mean, I met you just on Jericho Road. You just said, you know, Jesse Jackson's my guy. In 1983, that was a very radical thing to do for anybody, white, black, yellow, or red. But we found this kid who was about just a few years older than me, and my parents were worried about him, but he was just out on the road trying to get people to vote for Jesse Jackson as a white guy, but as a right guy. I think this man can take us in the right direction. That's all it was about. My father's longest-serving staff member was a white man, Frank Watkins. No one was more loyal to him. No one. The first two people, my father hired three people when Dr. King hired him. Lucille Conway Loman, who was Reverend Clay Evans' secretary, and Gary Masoni and David Wall.